The rain poured heavily over the winding dirt roads of Surulere. The wind howled through the old baobab trees, rattling the windows of the modest compound where Adunola lived. She had always known that life in the city was unforgiving. Dreams here came with a price, sometimes more than one could pay. Adunola, a clever and ambitious woman, had spent years trying to build a life beyond the poverty that clung to her family like a stubborn shadow. Then came Obinna, a wealthy and charismatic man from a distant part of Lagos. He visited her with an air of mystery and promises that seemed too good to be true. "Adunola, you deserve more than this life," he said, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite read. "Marry me, and I'll give you everything you've ever wanted." She hesitated. She had heard rumors about rich men who used charm as a mask for dark intentions. But the thought of wealth, freedom from endless struggle, was intoxicating. Her mind raced with possibilities. As the proposal continued, Obinna spoke of an ancient family tradition, a ritual performed on the night of the wedding to ensure prosperity and protection. Adunola's heart skipped a beat. There was something about the way he said it, a quiet intensity that made the air feel heavier. "You must promise to follow the ritual exactly," Obinna whispered, leaning close so only she could hear. "It is not optional." Adunola's instinct screamed caution, but ambition silenced her fear. She nodded. The night of the wedding arrived, and the compound was filled with music, laughter, and the aroma of spice dishes. Guests wore traditional attire, their bright fabrics shining under the lanterns. Everything seemed joyous, almost normal. Yet, shadows lingered in the corners. The wind outside had turned into a sinister chorus, echoing through the empty alleys beyond. As the ceremony ended, Obinna took her hand, guiding her away from the crowd. The lanterns flickered, and the sounds of celebration faded into the distance. They arrived at a secluded room within the compound. The walls were lined with carved symbols, their meanings unfamiliar to her. Candles flickered on the floor, casting dancing shadows that seemed to twist into grotesque shapes. "Adunola," Obinna said softly, "tonight, the ritual begins. You must do exactly as instructed." Her stomach churned. Something about the room felt wrong. The air was too thick, the shadows too deliberate. She forced a smile, hiding the growing panic inside her. Obinna placed a small, ornate bowl in the center of the room. Its surface shimmered unnaturally. The instructions were simple, at least on the surface, but the urgency in Obinna's eyes suggested grave consequences. Adunola looked around, sensing a danger she couldn't yet name. This wasn't just about wealth. Something deeper, darker, demanded her compliance. The first step of the ritual was about to begin, and the line between celebration and horror had already blurred. The moment Adunola stepped into the room, the door clicked shut behind her. The music, laughter, and voices of the wedding guests were swallowed by an unnatural silence. The candle flames flickered violently as if reacting to some unseen presence. Her heart pounded against her ribcage like a drum echoing in the eerie stillness. Obinna knelt beside the ornate bowl, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings along its rim. The design seemed almost alive, writhing in the candlelight. He looked up at Adunola with a strange intensity, the kind that made her skin crawl. "Adunola," he said, voice low and firm, "the first step is simple, but absolute. You must place your hand in the bowl and speak the words of acceptance." Her fingers trembled as she leaned closer, staring at the shimmering liquid inside. It wasn't water, nor any substance she had ever seen. It glowed faintly red, almost like blood, but thicker, viscous and dark, reflecting the candlelight in strange, unnatural patterns. Something whispered in the back of her mind, "Don't do it, it's not what it seems." She swallowed hard. Obinna's gaze was relentless, almost hypnotic. "Do it," he urged. Your future depends on it. Adunola reached out, her fingers barely grazing the surface. The moment she touched it, a cold shock raced up her arm. Images flashed before her eyes, faces twisted in silent screams, shadows crawling along the walls, whispers of people she had never met. Her breath caught, but she forced herself to obey. I accept the ritual, she whispered, her voice trembling. The bowl's liquid shivered, and a low hum filled the room. Shadows seemed to gather around the corners, coiling like serpents, almost alive. Adunola stepped back, but the moment she did, the hum deepened, and a sharp, whispering voice echoed in her mind. It begins, and you cannot turn back. Obina nodded solemnly. The ritual demands a sacrifice. Not yours, yet. But someone's. Tonight, one life will balance the scales. Adunola's stomach twisted. She had expected strange traditions, perhaps symbols and chants, but not death. Her mind raced, who? Who will it be? Suddenly, the floor beneath her shifted, the shadows moving like liquid, reshaping themselves into grotesque forms. One shadow stretched toward her, a black tendril curling along the floor like a living thing. She recoiled, heart hammering, but Obina's hand on her shoulder kept her rooted. You must trust the ritual, he said softly, almost reassuringly, but there was a weight behind his words that made her shiver. Everything that happens tonight ensures your future. Then, the first unexpected twist, the bowl's liquid began to rise slowly, hovering in the air as if defying gravity. Shapes formed in its surface, faces contorted in anguish, mouths opening as if screaming silently. Adunola's eyes widened. She realized the ritual wasn't just a ceremony, it was a doorway. And something had begun to emerge. Outside the room, the wind howled with unnatural force. The walls seemed to pulse with energy. Adunola's hands shook as she tried to steady herself. She had entered this for wealth, for freedom from her struggles, but now, she understood the gravity of what she had unleashed. The first step was complete. And the darkness was no longer just a shadow in the corner, it was alive. The hum from the ritual bowl had barely faded when a sudden knock echoed through the secluded room. Adunola froze, her breath catching in her throat. The door had been locked from the inside, she knew no one should be able to enter. Obina's eyes narrowed, the faintest flicker of worry crossing his otherwise calm face. No one should be here, he whispered. His hand tightened on hers, a rare crack in his composed demeanor. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, almost frantic. The shadows along the walls stretched toward the sound, riding as if they, too, were aware of the intruder. Adunola's pulse raced. Who, or what, could it be? Before she could react, the door creaked open slowly on its own. A tall figure stepped in, cloaked in a hooded robe. The faint glow of the candles revealed a face she didn't recognize, yet the eyes seemed familiar, as if staring straight into her deepest fears. Who are you? Adunola demanded, her voice shaky but firm. The figure didn't speak. Instead, it raised a thin, pale hand and pointed toward the ritual bowl. The liquid shimmered violently, rising higher than before, twisting into shapes that resembled hands reaching for the intruder. Obina stepped forward, his voice low and commanding. Leave, now. This is not for outsiders. The stranger tilted their head slightly, the hood falling back to reveal Equim, a mysterious figure from a distant village known for ancient rites. Adunola had heard whispers of him. He was said to appear only when a ritual threatened to break the balance between life and death. You shouldn't be here, Obina said, tension threading his words. This is a sacred process. Equim's gaze fell on Adunola, unblinking. She has already touched the bowl, he said. The ritual is awake. It senses fear, it senses greed. And it hungers. Adunola's stomach turned. Fear gripped her as she realized this was far bigger than wealth or ambition. The ritual wasn't just a tradition, it was a force that demanded more than obedience. Suddenly, the shadows in the corners surged forward, slithering along the walls like living ink. One reached toward Adunola, tendrils brushing her skin cold as ice. She screamed, stumbling back, but Obina grabbed her arm, holding her firmly in place. "You must finish the first step," he shouted over the rising chaos. "Do not let it break free." Equim stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the floating liquid. He chanted in a tongue she didn't understand. The ritual bowl reacted violently, the liquid forming a swirling vortex, faces of unseen victims pressing against the surface. Adunola realized the first twist: the ritual had not only begun, it had already claimed attention beyond the room. Someone, or something, had noticed her touch, and it had come. Her hands shook as the chanting grew louder, the shadows now riding as if alive. Equim looked at her with a mixture of warning and expectation. "Your choices now will determine who survives this night, and who becomes its offering." Obina's hand tightened on hers once more. "Do you understand?" Adunola nodded, even though terror clawed at her throat. The room had transformed from a ceremonial space to a battlefield between forces she barely understood. And the unexpected guest, Equim, was the key she hadn't anticipated. Outside, the wind screamed like 1,000 voices, and somewhere in the compound, a candle blew out, plunging the corner of the room into utter darkness. The night had only just begun. Adunola's chest heaved as she tried to steady her shaking hands. The floating liquid in the bowl churned violently, faces pressed against its surface like trapped souls, their silent screams echoing inside her mind. Equim's chanting grew louder, reverberating through the room, while Obina's eyes never left hers, dark and intense. "You've done well to reach this far," Obina said, voice low and calm, almost unnervingly so. "But the ritual, it is not satisfied yet." Adunola's heart skipped a beat. Not satisfied. What could it want more? Equim's gaze shifted toward her. "The ritual demands a life," he said, each word deliberate. "Not just obedience, not just blood traced in symbol. It wants a balance. A human balance. Tonight, the offering must be chosen, or chaos will consume all." Adunola's mind spun. She had agreed to follow the ritual for wealth, not for death. Her stomach churned as a creeping realization dawned: the price of ambition was far higher than she had imagined. Obina gestured toward the bowl. "You must select the offering," he said. "It can be yours, someone present, or someone yet to arrive." Hesitation is fatal. Adunola's gaze flickered across the room. Shadows seemed to ride along the walls, curling closer with each passing second, as though waiting for her decision. The air smelled metallic, heavy, suffocating. Her mind screamed that she was trapped in something ancient and unstoppable. Then, the first twist came. A small figure emerged from the shadows in the corner of the room, Ngozi, a young servant girl who had been quietly observing the wedding. Her eyes were wide with fear, her lips trembling. Adunola instinctively knew that Ngozi had no idea what awaited her, but somehow, the ritual had marked her presence. "No!" Adunola shouted, stepping in front of her. "It can't be her." Obina's jaw tightened. The ritual does not care for innocence. It cares for balance. Equim raised his hands, and the shadows surged forward, forming an almost solid wall between them and the room's entrance. The chanting intensified, and the faces in the liquid grew sharper, clearer, human, grotesque, screaming silently at her for intervention. Adunola felt herself trembling uncontrollably. She had thought wealth would solve her problems, that ambition would free her family from poverty. Now, The very thing she had sought was demanding blood, threatening to consume everyone she cared for. Then she noticed a subtle movement in the candlelight. One shadow slithered toward her, not malevolent, but insistent, almost pleading. It seemed to point toward herself. Her pulse raced. Could it be that the offering was meant to be her? No, she whispered, voice cracking. There has to be another way. Equim's chanting paused briefly. He tilted his head, a faint smile forming. There is always another way, he said softly. But it requires cunning, courage, and deception. Choose wisely, Adunola. One wrong move, and all of you will feed the ritual. Adunola's mind worked frantically. She had to think quickly. The shadows writhed, the faces screamed, the liquid pulsed. The first lesson of the ritual was clear: it was not just about following instructions. It tested will, morality, and fear, and it would exploit any hesitation. The room seemed to pause with anticipation, waiting for her to decide. One wrong step, one misjudgment, and the night would claim more than her ambition. Adunola's hand hovered over the ornate bow. Her decision in the next few moments would shape the rest of the night, and perhaps her very soul. Adunola's fingers hovered above the bow, the cold, viscous liquid rippling unnaturally beneath her touch. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to run, but the shadows had blocked the doors. Equim's chant reverberated through the room like the heartbeat of something ancient, something alive. Obina's grip on her shoulder tightened, a silent warning that hesitation would have consequences. Her eyes darted to Ngozi, trembling in the corner. The young girl's wide, innocent eyes reflected pure fear. Adunola's heart wrenched. She wanted to protect her, to shield her from the ritual's horrifying reach, but the shadow stirred, growing restless, twisting toward the center of the room as if sensing Adunola's hesitation. You must choose. Obina's voice cut sharply through the hum of the ritual. Do not delay. Adunola's mind raced. There has to be another way, a loophole, something. She remembered Equim's words: cunning, courage, deception. If she could outsmart the ritual, maybe she could survive without allowing innocent blood to be spilled. Then an idea struck. A small, trembling smile formed in her mind. I will trick it. She stepped forward, kneeling beside the bowl, and spoke in a voice steadier than she felt. I offer myself, willingly. The liquid in the bowl surged violently, spiraling upward like a cyclone of darkness. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if surprised. Equim's eyes widened, and even Obine faltered for a fraction of a second. The ritual paused with anticipation, testing her resolve. The faces in the liquid writhed, screaming silently, pressing closer as if hungry for life. But Adunola held her ground, her gaze unwavering. Suddenly, the first twist revealed itself. A shadow detached from the wall and slithered toward her, but instead of attacking, it hovered above the bowl, forming a protective dome around Ngozi. The ritual's hunger had been deceived. The liquid and the shadows accepted Adunola's willingness, yet redirected their demand. Obina stepped closer, a mixture of admiration and caution in his eyes. Clever, he muttered. The ritual is unpredictable. Equim, however, did not relax. It accepted your offer, yes, he said slowly. But remember, rituals of this magnitude never forget. You have postponed its hunger, but the balance demands payment. Adunola's chest heaved. She had protected Ngozi, but the cost of survival was far from over. The shadows retreated slightly, curling along the walls, but the liquid in the bowl still shimmered with malevolent energy. The first sacrifice had been avoided, but the ritual's attention had shifted, now fully focused on her. Outside, the wind intensified, rattling the compound, carrying with it faint, haunting whispers. Adunola realized that this night was far from over, the real test had only just begun. She looked at Obinna and then at Ekwim. "Tell me, what is the next step?" she demanded, her voice trembling yet resolute. Obinna's dark eyes glimmered with a hint of amusement. "The ritual never stops," he said. "And tonight, the true challenge begins." Adunola's chest rose and fell as the shadows slowly retreated, yet the ritual room still pulsed with a dark, living energy. Candle flames trembled, throwing warped shapes across the walls, while the bowl at the center continued to shimmer. Inside it, the crimson liquid swirled with faint, whispering faces calling her name. Obinna watched her carefully and told her she had survived the first test, but survival was not the same as control. The ritual, he revealed, was not merely a family tradition or a path to wealth. It was an ancient covenant with forces far older than the village itself, one that demanded balance between desire, intention, and sacrifice. Ekwim explained that the spirit sensed greed and fear. Those who entered the ritual for selfish reasons were tested first, and the ritual twisted itself to reflect their true nature. Adunola realized her longing for wealth had placed her in danger, yet her choice to protect another life had also changed the outcome. As the bowl suddenly rippled violently, twisted ancestral faces formed along the walls, reacting to the conflict within her heart. Then came an unexpected turn. From the swirling shadows emerged a faintly glowing spirit, her great-grandmother Edfunk, who had once completed the ritual centuries before. Speaking directly into Adunola's mind, the ancestor revealed that the ritual was not an enemy but a mirror, exposing truth through fear, desire, and sacrifice. Her presence calmed the chaos, and even Obinna seemed surprised by the intervention. For the first time, Adunola understood that every decision she made would shape not only her fate but the lives around her. The night was far from over, but beneath the fear, she finally felt a fragile sense of control, and a small, dangerous hope of surviving what came next. Adunola was still shaken after seeing her ancestor spirit, but the ritual room refused to come. The shadows along the walls moved restlessly, as if angered by her brief control. Obinna sensed the change immediately, warning that even her ancestor could not restrain the ritual forever. Suddenly, the bowl's crimson liquid exploded outward, spreading across the floor like living veins while tortured whispers grew louder, repeating words about balance, blood, and life. The ritual revealed its true nature, it was alive and adapting. Shadows split into tendrils that attacked everyone at once, wrapping around Obinna and lunging toward Ekwim while another crept dangerously close to Ngozi. Realizing the ritual now saw her protection of innocence as an imbalance, Adunola pulled Ngozi back, but the shadows trapped them near the center of the room. Understanding she could no longer outsmart it, Adunola made a desperate choice. She grabbed the ornate bowl and confronted the ritual directly, refusing to sacrifice anyone else. As she accepted responsibility and faced it without fear, the shadows recoiled violently, slamming back against the walls as if wounded by her courage. Even Ekwim was stunned, realizing the ritual could be resisted through honesty rather than deception. For a brief moment, Adunola believed she had gained control. She understood the ritual's lesson, it punished fear and lies but responded to courage and acceptance. Yet relief vanished when a cold, malevolent whisper rose from the darkness, repeating only one demand: the blood. The ritual had not ended, it had only grown stronger, now preparing to claim something far closer to her than she ever expected. The shadows slowly pulled back, but the whispers refused to fade, filling the ritual room with a chilling chorus. Standing over the bowl, Adunola finally understood the truth behind everything. The ritual was never about wealth or blind obedience, it was a mirror meant to expose a person's true intentions. Remembering Edfang's words, she confronted her deepest fear and let go of the greed that had brought her there. Choosing life over sacrifice, she declared that no innocent blood would be offered again, even if she had to face the consequences herself. Her honesty changed everything. The bowl erupted into a violent vortex before coming, and the raging shadows shrank away as if defeated by her acceptance. Feng's spirit appeared one final time, confirming that the ritual was complete because Adunola had understood its true demand: courage, balance, and accountability. Even Obina and Equim, experienced guardians of the rite, stood in shock and respect, admitting that very few had ever survived by confronting the ritual directly. As the supernatural energy faded, the room returned to normal. The shadows vanished, the symbols stopped glowing, and the oppressive weight lifted from the air. Though exhausted, Adunola realized she had gained something greater than wealth, strength, wisdom, and the understanding that power without conscience always carries a price. At dawn, she stepped outside with Ngozi, the rising light over Surulere marking the end of the nightmare. Yet the ritual's memory lingered within her, a quiet reminder that darkness never truly disappears. The wind through the baobab trees carried a final warning: power demands sacrifice, and wisdom requires courage. Adunola had survived the night, but her journey with the unseen world had only just begun. The ritual tested her courage, honesty, and heart. Would you have the strength to face it? If you want more terrifying African rituals like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Comment below: would you risk everything for wealth like Adunola did?